Thank you guys so much. Yes. Thank you, Derek. Now we're going to get into the political part of the program. And before we have someone introduce our prime minister candidate to address the crowd, I want to say that it is a distinct privilege for me as the leader of the AFC group in the USA, on behalf of all the chapters of the AFC USA group, Florida, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Maryland, New York, New Jersey, Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and our colleagues from Canada. It is my distinct privilege to announce that we not only welcome this coalition, we support it 1,000%. You have our full service at your disposal. As the saying goes, I was talking to a good friend yesterday, and this time, more than any other time, I think it's the right time for this coalition. The leadership of Mr. Granger, Mr. Nagamootoo, is going to be what it takes to transform our nation to where it needs to be, where all of us can feel comfortable when we go back home. And so, without further ado, I'm going to ask our Vice President of the New York, New Jersey chapter of the AFC, Mr. Ewart Marshall, to introduce the Prime Minister candidate.
Thank you, Dr. Somar. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ewart Marshall, and I'm the Vice Chairman of the New York, New Jersey chapter of the AFC, which pretty much means USA. Now, I've been in this position for quite a few years. I've tried to pass it on to others, but they keep re-electing me. So I don't know, perhaps I'm doing something wrong, or no one wants the job. Before I start my remarks, welcome to Mr. Granger, Mr. Nagamootoo, other guests on the head table. Welcome to New York. This past week I've been reflecting on the origins of the AFC. I was invited to join the AFC by Ms. Sheila Holder. We all remember Sheila. Yeah. Anyone who knows about the origins of the AFC knows that at some point Sheila brought Kemraj Ramjatan and Raphael Trotman together on a trip. It was a scheme basically to put them together to talk so they could find common ground, which they did. So we all know that all great trees start from a seed somewhere, and so we must remember that Sheila played a great part in where the AFC is now. And from those beginnings, we now have this coalition, APNU and AFC. I'm going to do something a bit selfish here right now. It's been my hope that the AFC headquarters in Georgetown be named after Ms. Sheila Holder. And I'm going to push that. I don't want to put too much pressure on Moses. I know the APNU guys don't have anything to say about that. But those of us who understand the origins of the AFC are going to push for that. And we'll expect your support come time. Well, we also have to remember, as another speaker mentioned, Mr. Sankar Nehru. He was there at the beginning. Unfortunately, he passed away a few weeks ago. He was the first member of our chapter in New York, New Jersey, USA, and I was the second second member. So I don't know. But anyway, my introduction to Mr. Moses Nagamootoo came during the 2011 elections in Guyana. I recall that as I entered our campaign war room, Moses was giving the team a lesson in history and politics. He was talking about, leaders he had met and lessons he had learned. And I realized then and there that, we were in the presence of one of Guyana's great statesmen and leaders. At one site, let's fast forward now to 2015. And I regard it as a great honor to be asked to introduce Moses to you today. If you were to read Moses' extensive bio, you would conclude that Moses Nagamootoo has served Guyana with distinction and in every capacity. Moses has been thoroughly prepared to be Guyana's next prime minister. Would you agree? Yes. Moses Nagamootoo has been teacher, journalist, author, attorney at law, justice of the peace, government minister, member of parliament, and statesman. But most of all, he's been a courageous fighter for what is right and proper in Guyana, and we know at this time, that's what's needed most. I'm not going to speak too much longer because we want to give the audience a chance to have their questions answered. But I just want to say, with the support of right-thinking Guyanese, abroad and at home, the next title we'll add to Moses' illustrious career of service will be Prime Minister of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. So I'd like everyone to rise as we welcome Mr. Moses Nagamootoo to the podium. Give him a warm welcome. A warm welcome to the next Prime Minister of Guyana, Mr. Moses V. Nagamootoo.
Kindly sit. Mr. David Granger, my colleague, friend, and brother, and the next president of Guyana, members of the head table, including the sister of the leader of the Alliance for Change, representing our dear brother Kemaraj Ramjatan, and the commander-in-chief of the AFC in the Queens area, Asha Balbachan, Freddie Shifdat, campaign manager, co-campaign manager, Joseph Harmon, I want to recognize the Colin Moore, and before I say anything further, I want to just say that Colin and I, we have gone back a long way from our life in the same village. They were, of course, living in Lancaster, but there was a very curious incident in my life involving, I don't know for sure, Colin, if it's your mother or your aunt, Moore, Teacher Moore, who took me, mother, yes, wonderful lady, took me to school, the first day in primary school. And the curious thing about that was that I went to school shock-tail. I was so eager to get into school that it didn't matter if I wore a pants that day. But in those days, you walk through the brown, dusty road and you kick the dust, and there's almost dust right up to where it needed to be covered. So I was fully covered. So that, in a sense, there's so much that we have in who we are and what we may become to the origins of our families and our relationship. And saying that, I am Moses, because when I was delivered from the womb of my mom there, Auntie Chuno, Nurse Michelle, Afro-Guyanese midwife, she named me Moses. And that is how I got that name, Moses. And so, what I'm going to say to you today has a lot to do with my own origin. That is, I came out of an environment where we didn't know differences in ethnicities. We were cradled by Afro-Guyanese. We were taught by Afro-Guyanese. We were inducted into moral and spiritual values. In my case, when I went to the Lutheran church, by Afro-Guyanese. And so our life, our origin, didn't give us much of a choice. And it is one of those moments of our life that I remember seeing David Granger. He wasn't short-tailed, he was in short pants, standing at a lamppost at the head of Wim Village, and we spoke fleetingly. I don't know if David ever remembered that, but I remember his father being a policeman at the Wim police station, and we were attending the same school, Auckland School, but not in the same class. I think I was a little brighter, I was. Yeah, it's true, because I had accelerated promotion. 1 week I spent in Little Infant, and I didn't go to Big Infant, that's what they call it. And before you know, I skipped Form 2, Standard 2, I skipped Standard 3, and I was in Standard 5. So by the time I got the school leaving, I had to borrow my brother's certificate, birth certificate, to write the thing, and that's how my name was in the beginning, not Moses Nagamootoo or Veersami Nagamootoo, I was Nagapen Nagamootoo. And so but when, the story gets more interesting than that, because when I went to school the first day, my sister's name, my eldest sister's name was Mari, my father was Mutu, and there was a boy sitting near to me whose name was Lachmanen. And when the teacher Baba shouted for us to say our names, this boy said Lachmanen, and I shouted almost simultaneously, Mutu. And so she gave me my name, Lachmanen Mari Mutu. Today, those people who do not see that we need to go forward in Guyana, perhaps wrongly so or rightly so, they have now changed my name from Nagamootoo to Nagamootoo. But that's all right. That's all right. The transmutation of name perhaps is appropriate when we are trying to take our country forward and to build the foundations for national and ethnic unity. It is perhaps what we want to do, to give up a little of ourselves, to give up a little of what we think we are, and how valuable we think what we are is to ourselves, and to transmute ourselves into a Guyanese personality. We have to give up a little bit of who we think we are, if we want to go there. And so, many people have asked, and I want to keep this as simple as possible, why did I make the decision to join David Granger? It's not that we share the same school or we share the same village. And of course, I was surprised when a relative died. I went to the funeral of Sister Julie, and there it was. I saw David Granger for the first time in many, many years at the funeral parlor at the head of Camp Street. And he was speaking on behalf of the Peters family, representing as the big brother of the family, because the big brother, Frankie, had died, and the other brother, Bio Peters, is somewhere in Canada, couldn't come to the funeral. And then I realized that Julie and Marge lived in our house. And they sold fish with my mother at the Wim Market and other markets. And Peters, John Peters, had a fishing boat. And he and my father worked the sea together. He inducted my father in fishing. They became great friends. And John Peters, Patrick John Peters, was the first Dravidian. He never called himself an African or a black man, but he was very black. Perhaps 1 minute after midnight. But he played the tapu at the Kali Puja, and he spoke fluent Telugu and Tamil. So I grew up in that environment, and then in that environment came David Granger. And then I realized that our path and our destiny might have been set many years before. So that's from that basis that people ask me question, why did you join up with David Granger? And perhaps I do not have the definitive answers. Perhaps the necessity of my country requires that this should be done, because I have joined politics at the age of 14 in 1961, and I've always been searching for something, perhaps searching for myself, because we all in a way suffered from an identity problem. And you have to forgive me that when I went to India, I was offered an award, and I was asked to make a few remarks. And when I spoke, some of my friends in Guyana, back home, were annoyed that I said I was not an Indian. I had said that I am from a country far away called Guyana. I have Indian-ness in me because of my ancestors. But if I had been born in Pakistan looking the same way I look, I would have been a Pakistani. If I had been in Trinidad, I would have been a Trini. If I had been born in Jamaica, I'd be a Jamaican. If I'd been born in any other country, I would have been carrying the nationality of that country. I wasn't born in India. I was born in Guyana, and I'm a proud Guyanese. And that is the path we need to take of examining ourselves, because once I had a drink with Martin Carter, the national poet of Guyana, and while we were drinking, I asked him a question. I was a reporter for the Mirror newspaper. I asked him a question, how did you become a poet? And he said that was a stupid question, and he was going to give me a stupid answer. And he said that when he was in jail by the British at Kingston Airport then, he was placed in a cell, and that he realized that in the cell he couldn't walk forward. They were the prison bars. And he said he decided that the only thing he could do in the cell is to walk backwards. And he said in walking backwards, he stepped into himself, because there was a point where he couldn't go any further, and he discovered a poet. And it was that time that he wrote the poem, "This is the dark time, my love. All around brown beetles crawl, watching you sleep and aiming at your dreams." We have returned to the 1950s, where now brown beetles crawl in our country. A young man, Carter had said that he was giving his shirt as a banner for the revolution against the British. And a young man came forward, and he had a bullhorn, and he was calling on people to vote Courtney Crum Ewing. He was calling for what any decent democratic country would tolerate. That is the right to dissent, the right to protest, the right to have your voice. And he was shot thrice at the back of his head. We realize that Martin Carter didn't leave us only a shirt to be the banner of the revolution. He has left us now, like Courtney, a bullhorn, which is a powerful, more powerful weapon, because from now on, we believe that if we are to transcend the darkness in our society, only the ballot can stop the bullets. So today, as I speak with you, we realize that that country that we love so much, our motherland, dear Guyana, suffers from an essential ingredient that would take it forward. It suffers from the ingredient of unity, ethnic and national unity. And so when the original former leaders of Guyana, the deceased leaders of Guyana, decided that they were going to engineer what was called the split of the national movement in 1955, they didn't split a political movement. They split the country. They didn't separate races. They cut our heart in two. And so the leaders realized that the common solution to Guyana's many problems must be national unity. Cheddi Jagan realized that, and in 1964, when he was the premier of Guyana, he reached out to his once co-leader and colleague Forbes Burnham and offered him to share the government 50-50. It didn't happen. Perhaps not because Burnham may not have wanted it. There were more powerful forces that didn't want it. The British and the American establishments, they didn't want the unity because in our fragility, in our division, capital and investment would triumph, and we would be too weak to stand up as a nation to resist the exploitation and the export of our raw material, our resources, our sugar, our timber, our bauxite. And all colonial powers all over the world behave the same way. And so it didn't happen in 1964, and we went into deeper problems, and we had the racial riots of the 60s. And then we came out about in the 70s, and even though there were many allegations that I wrote about and Cheddi wrote about that elections were fraudulent, the United States in particular did not mind that there was fraudulent elections once Jagan and the PPP were not the government. They played a critical role. If you read Arthur Sessinger's book, 1,000 Days in the White House, it is fully documented who fomented the riots, who paid for it, who actually engineered the division in Guyana. And so in 1975, 1976, 1977, knowing that the Cold War was on and that there was no way that the PPP would be permitted or Jagan would be permitted to form the government, Cheddi Jagan offered critical support first to Burnham against the foreigners because they were the main #1 adversary. And two, he said there should be need for a national front and a national front government. It was Cheddi Jagan who I followed all my adult life, all my life, who would send me secretly to talk to people associated with Burnham to find out if he wanted to talk. And I will do many meanderings, none of which you would ever see in writing. Blowing the ears, hanging a camera on my shoulder, going to the airport when a dignitary would arrive, finding a way to get close to Burnham or get close to Laurie Lewis or to the Secret Service to tell them Cheddi wants to talk. And therefore, when you see the first allegations made that elections were rigged in 1973, I believe that Jagan felt that the national interest was more important than perennially quarreling about rigged elections, because those are the things that divided us. And it didn't work. There was no national front, and there was no national front government. I recall that one of the authors